Yeah, so come and visit the Docker meetup if you're interested in learning more about Docker. It's at Red Hat, so it won't be far. I see one Red Hat person in the room and a couple of folks from Flight Centre. So I used to work at Flight Centre 4 years ago, and I started working for Red Hat, doing JBoss support, and now I do like all the middleware suite. I'm a Java programmer, so this Linux stuff is kind of a stretch for me. But yeah, Docker is not a Red Hat product. It's a product by Docker.io, but I think Red Hat and community in general are excited about it because it's a neat way to run and package applications at this stage for Linux. So let's jump into it. What is Docker? It's a lightweight container. It's a storage for containers, and it's images for building containers. And on top of that, there's some repository features for sharing images with other people. Has anyone used Docker? Yeah? A little bit? Yeah. Cool. What do you use Docker for?
We're looking at switching it to replace packaging. Like just it's a pure packaging mechanism, so none of the fancy stuff at the moment, but just as purely a way of just packaging products rather than like traditional RPM or anything like that.
Cool, yeah, so that's a really good use case. And I do a bit of work with OpenShift, so I support OpenShift. And I think Red Hat are thinking about a similar kind of thing, like packaging, being able to package applications for OpenShift using Docker. Because it's a neat way to ship things. It's basically a container.
What is that OpenShift?
What's OpenShift? It's a platform as a service. So you can use it for free. So you can create an account at openshift.redhat.com, and you can we pay the bill to Amazon Web Services to host all your images. You get 3 small containers, and you can. It's a PaaS, so it gives you like an application server, and you just deploy your code to it, and it's really cool. But that's not the topic for today. It uses Linux LXC containers, just like Docker. So there are some kind of similarities, but it's different. Yeah, so why Docker? If you've looked at the Docker website, there's this really cool analogy on there about shipping containers and Docker. Have you all seen that? Yeah? I thought that was a really good explanation. So it goes in the 1920s or whenever they started shipping things in massive things for commerce. It was really hard to package, what was there, Porsches and pineapples. Like, where do you put the pineapples? Do they get crushed by the Porsche or whatever? But someone could just steal your Porsche once you get to the port. But if you ship things in shipping containers, then it makes it really easy to stack them. The standard sizes for ships where you can put them, and everything's secure and it's in the same state, hopefully, when it left as when it arrives. So in this image at the top there, if you can read it, there's a bunch of static websites, user DBs, web front ends, queues, basically a bunch of services, and they can all be packaged in a Docker container. It encapsulates an engine that enables any payload to be encapsulated as a lightweight, portable, self-sufficient container. And then at the bottom you've got all types of runtimes, I guess you call them, like a public cloud, a contributor's laptop, a QA server, and a development VM. So they can be manipulated using standard operations and run consistently on virtually any hardware platform that runs Linux. So I think there are plans to be able to run Docker as a container for in Windows, but you can't do it yet. You can do it in Fedora 20, which is what I'm going to demonstrate. You can do it. They develop it in Ubuntu, and that's all I know of. Maybe you could run it in CentOS. So it makes the entire life cycle more efficient, consistent, and repeatable. It eliminates inconsistencies between environments, and it addresses significant performance, cost, deployment, and portability issues normally associated with VMs. So this is kind of like, I like this, I mean, I know about OpenShift, so has anyone used OpenShift? One couple of people. I guess with virtual machines, right, every time you load up a virtual machine, you've got to give it the whole chunk of memory, a whole chunk of disk, and that it occupies all those resources until it shuts down. It's also slow to start up most of the time. I mean, Docker's a lot faster, as you'll see. So also, you can't just run a process in a VM, I don't think, and then shut it down. At least that's not very efficient for the VM technologies that I've used. So what Docker provides you is a way to significantly decrease the amount of resources that you need to run a process. You don't need to start up a VM in order to run your application. Yeah, so it's very quick to start, very quick to stop. It only uses the resources that it needs to run its process, and then it shuts down. I mean, this is how, like, we use Amazon Web Services for OpenShift. So we basically pay Amazon to host everyone's application in there, right? We've got a big public service where anyone could just run 3 applications in there, but no one uses their applications 24/7. So when they do want to use their applications, we can start an LXC container, run your web application in it, shut it down when it's not being used, and it's all very quick, and you won't even be able to tell what happened. So, a demo of creating a container. So, I'm going to switch to my command line in a minute, but this is my backup plan in case I screw it up. But, so basically you can run a command in Docker by doing something like this. So, sudo docker run, and I want to run it, so the I-T basically says that I want to connect to it with my shell, and I want that output to come back to my shell. And I want to run Fedora, and I want to run bash. I have to run it in sudo. Okay, so now I'm in a Fedora image. I mean, I guess you could consider it a VM, but it's a LXC container. And I've got a shell, so I can do anything I want that I can normally do in Fedora, but let's stick to the script. So, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show how that container is running. So if I exit the container, it stops and there's nothing running anymore. But I'm going to start it back up so that I can show you what the PS command looks like. So, as you can see, I've actually got 2 containers running. One of them from my demo yesterday, which I didn't shut down. So this shows the currently running processes. And I ran 2 of those. I ran 2 of those. This gets interesting. But at least one of those is this machine here. I think probably the latest one. Oh, it's been up for 9 seconds, yes. And the 2, I've been up 22 hours, so those must have been ones I was playing with yesterday. So I might just deviate from the script so that I can stop these containers, because that could mess things up. Hopefully this doesn't throw a spanner. Anyway, let's continue with the presentation. So basically PS is a command that shows the running containers. So what I want to demo next is saving your changes. So in the top line there, what I'm doing is I'm doing exactly the same thing as I did before. I'm running a Docker image, and I'm connecting to it with a shell, and then I'm going to install Apache. So I've stopped that container now, which is good. Let me go stop the other one. Oops. So I only got the one running now. So now I'm going to install BD. Hopefully that won't take very long. But if I was to exit, after I've installed this, and then run the same command again that I ran before to drop into the shell using my Fedora image, I'd actually have a new container, and no longer would HTTPD be installed, and I'd have to install it again, which would be very annoying. Oh, I know why that's not working. It's because I'm not connected to the network. I didn't think I needed the network for this presentation, but I actually do. So my presentation might not work.
Do you want hand connecting?
Yeah, I could. I couldn't find it at least before, which was
Isn't that what cable on the floor?
We have to type it.
Yeah.
Do you have Ethernet?
Yeah, it's in.
There's one there. Don't know if it works.
It sits on the.
Go watching.
So the Wi-Fi settings connected in that network should be done.
I can put the name in via the
Yeah.
settings.
You need to type on it.
Can I use your Ethernet?
Yeah, they've moved it in F20 now. You've got to go under Wi-Fi settings.
Okay, I know where that is.
And make a new Wi-Fi connection.
But I should have connected before and not given up.
Sorry.
So I can add one?
No, click cancel. There should be a button at the bottom, one of the three.
Hotspot.
They connected in.
Oh, he did.
Might be in that list. Like not. Yes.
I think it's not broadcasting, yeah. So network name is capital ABB. ABB guest.
Doesn't let me write a couple of letters. That's weird.
Juice WPA 2. Yep.
Is that it?
Yep. Password's behind you.
It's case sensitive as well.
Is it? This thing doesn't let me write in uppercase. Very strange. Oh, that does. Sorry about this. Zero. Oh, that's right. Best. Okay. A slight deviation from this. Yes, okay. Let me try that again. Configuration. Oh no. There you go. Yes. Okay. So I have to contact the Fedora repo to get the patchy bits. Patches. But I think Apache is a really good example because I think most of us use Apache. The example on the website uses this little tool called NC, which I'd never personally used before. And I used it in my last example, and people were like, what the hell did you do? So I had to run it locally just to show what it did. So, yeah, basically, I won't actually show what I was going to show, but if I just exit out of that and ran the same thing again, I'd basically start a new container. So I wouldn't have the changes that I'd made to my previous container. But I can persist changes to my container by using the docker commit command. And I have to pass container ID to docker commit, so I need to store the container ID, or I need to pass it to the commit command. So now that that's complete, I can get the ID of it. I can persist it. And all of these commands, by the way, have help, so I could go sudo docker commit. Oh, I can't remember what the commands are. Yes, that's right. I need a commit message, container, repository. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to give it the container ID, and then I'm going to give it a repository. I'm just going to call it hopefully one that I already have. So let me check. I already have one called Fedora HTTPD, of course, because I used it yesterday. So I'm going to give it another name. Fedora Demo. Or, yeah. Alright, so what it spat back to me was my image ID. So if I do sudo docker images, you'll notice as well that it's got a really long ID there, but when I do sudo docker images, it's the first part, like the first 10 characters or something of that ID, and they're interchangeable. So yeah, I've got a new docker image. By the way, the size here is not an actual size of the image on disk, it's only a diff from the original image. So the original image, Fedora, was 387 and it's, I don't know, 20 megabytes bigger. Seems like a lot. Yeah, so after we've committed changes, then we can actually, now I can exit this container and I can run it, but I can use the new image ID. Oops. So my image ID is still in my buffer, I think. So instead of passing the image Fedora, I'm going to pass it my image ID. I'm going to drop back into the shell. And if I have a look at, okay, maybe that's not the correct image ID, sorry. So the docker images, I want that one. I used the wrong image ID for some reason. Now if I do RPM QA HTTP, which lists tells me about HTTPD package, and I've got one installed. If I did yum install HTTPD again, it would say, no, you already have that installed, nothing to do. Okay, so so the next part of my demo is I'm going to show you how to access Apache through like a forwarded port. So I'm going to run Apache inside my image, my container, and set up a port on my host, which I can access the VM through. So in order to do that, you need to run Apache in the foreground because by default it starts a daemon thread, which doesn't really work well with Docker because a daemon, we found out yesterday, you can't connect to it easily from the Docker. That's about as much as I know about it. So we found out that you need to run it in the foreground in order to be able to connect to it. So I'll just test out the command that actually works. So I use user SBing and HTTPD and run it in the foreground. It's running, and if oops. Now if I miss that, oh, I don't have netstat. Okay, there it is. It's running in my container, but that's not much good because I can't connect to it. So I might be able to bind a port after the fact, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to run the command and specify the port that I want to bind it to when I run it. So I'm going to use the docker run command, which is, I haven't used, oh yes I did. I've used this before, but I passed bin bash to it last time, so I dropped into the shell. But this time I'm going to actually pass in a different command, which is run Apache, just the same, in blue they're the same command that I ran when I was actually in the shell. So let me just, I've actually got this one in the text pad because it's very hard to type. But let's look at that command a bit more closely. So what this actually does is it just runs, so the same, I ran bin bash here before. And the arguments I passed before were IT because I wanted to actually connect to it with my shell so I could get input and output from it. But this time I'm going to pass the -e command and tell it this is my local machine part, so on my host I want to bind to all NICs. I want to connect to like forward port 8080 to 80 on the host container. And then I pass it my image ID, which is the same one I used before, to commit HTTPD to. And the T lets me see the output from the command. So, let's try. I'm running this on the host, and it's the wrong image ID, but I think I have it in my buffer still. No, probably not. So let me get the right one. So Docker images. Just make sure nothing's running. So the Docker PS, nothing's running. So I use this image ID that I used before. And I'll pass it through. Pass in my, where did it go? After the T, before the command. And so now I can see the output that the container spat back to me, so I know it's running. And now I can access it in the web browser because it's running on my machine. So let's open the browser. And I bound it to port 8080. There it is. It's actually running inside my container. So that's pretty much the end of my demo section. Any questions on that?
Do you reckon you could alias those image IDs, the containers, or just number
So you
them
didn't
or
have to
something?
use the ID?
Yeah, so you said you'd be doing grab them
Yeah.
and they're quite long.
A newer Docker gives you a name.
Does it?
Yeah, or like a Xerox now.
Oh, okay.
They're kind of like funny names, but
I think we saw them up there before when you were PS. Like hungry
Yeah.
eyes.
It's a bit confusing to me. When you do
Jovial
Docker,
Bell.
Is it
when you
PS
do
command?
Docker images, you've got the name, but you don't seem to be able to pass this name. You have to pass this one, which is odd. Like if I tried to run that command passing that name, it wouldn't work.
Are you talking about with the PS command? You see the last column shows you the crazy name.
Oh, sorry, you're talking about
Is that what you're talking about?
the image name.
The 612 others?
Sick toilets, yeah. I wondered where that came from.
Yeah.
Is that it? So I can use that name. Okay, let me try that. Sick toilets.
Yeah. One where that came
So yes, it's still running. So let's sudo docker stop sick toilets. Should know that guy. Who is this guy? Yes, thank you. That's really neat.
Can you
It's also
explain?
quite cool because they keep on the names.
Yeah,
keep on-
yeah. I wondered. Like, I know
So
that
it's
word.
better.
Why is
Say
this
one
popping
better
up?
than the other way.
Yeah, that's cool.
I have a general question. You've got these, is it, I have the problem on the virtual box when I don't have a network, it doesn't seem to work very well. Like you need a network with these VMs and things. Would that be what your problem was when you said I need the internet or whatever?
Yeah, I was trying to pull up some packages from the Fedora repo, so I needed the network. If you didn't have a network,
Just to get that
You can-
IF config, the ports are all, I can't connect to it, probably. I can't SSH to it.
yeah,
Okay.
you can share parts of the disk, and this is something that Trevor showed yesterday in his presentation. But I'm not exactly sure how to do it. You'd have to look up the docs. But if you had like an image on your host that you wanted to share with your, or like even a package like an RPM, like I installed an RPM, then you can mount the disk of the host and read images from the host machine. I don't know if I don't know how to do that. Maybe I did. Yeah, I've never tried that before, but if I just run like,
It's certainly easier when you're playing with Docker to have a raw machine than using it inside virtual boxes.
yeah, right.
But that's only because the mental model just goes an extra step when you're running a container inside a virtual machine
Yep.
on top of your OS.
Yeah, and it's a bit safer as well.
Nothing's safe with Docker. Really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, no, it's pretty easy to break stuff. So,
Yeah, it is.
So just, yeah.
And it actually consumes a lot of disk space, so that's a good tip. That where does it store the data? You remember? Is it under
Bar the Docker.
var? Yeah, what?
Bar the Docker.
Yeah, so under here, there's apparently, like, Trevor was having this problem that he's like, oh, I have to reinstall Docker every few times because it consumes too much disk space. Apparently they're having, like, I said that the disks don't actually take, they don't consume the whole size of the image, and theoretically that's true, but they use this kind of onioning system where, you know, the image is in the middle and then they just add little bits, they do diffs, but it doesn't work very well yet, so it leaks disk space a little bit. So,
It's only a RHEL family problem.
oh, it's a Fedora problem.
It's a Fedora RHEL
Yeah,
problem.
okay. We'll take the blame for that one. It works well on Ubuntu. But on Fedora you have to,
They're fixing it, they next release will have to fix it.
oh really, cool. So on this one you've got a delete.
No, they
Device
you need a new kernel and a whole bunch of stuff, but they're going to start trimming the file system down again and doing a bunch of weird stuff. And once again, it's just because of our crazy new dev implementation. Whatever.
Yeah, you've got to delete Corral
Because it's all in system D.
containers if anyone's going to use Fedora, but I won't do it because I lose all my images.
Can you explain again the difference between when you pull a base image, you list the images, and you do the PS? You've got the original base image that you pull, so it was Fedora.
Yeah.
And then when you ls the images, are they saved?
Yeah, they're kind of in a local repository. You can think of them like a local repository.
Yep. So they're instantiations of that base Fedora in a way.
Yeah, they're like, they're actually a bit like the VMs, I suppose. They're images, yeah. Like VM images. They're about 300 megs in size, as you saw. They're all sitting on the disk. Like when I pulled Fedora, you actually get like 4 different versions of Fedora. I've got CentOS there. Yeah, so like different variants of the same with different tags.
So does it appear in that line, in that listing when you commit it? Is that when it creates a new image?
Yes, so until you commit like a local image, container, it's not an image until you commit it.
Yep.
Yeah. And it commits to your local repo.
And then the PS command lists running containers? Is that
Yep.
terminology?
Yeah. And which we might want to do later, is if you create an account on Docker.io, you can, if you save your image under your username / a name, you can then push that into the Docker repo, and that way you can share images with each other. Which would be cool.
So it's my understanding that if you update your base Fedora image, that then affects any of the child images of that. Is that correct?
That's a good question.
I don't think it actually does. You need to rebuild and rebase, unfortunately. Because I could be wrong. But
See, I thought they were actually, it's a union file system,
Yeah.
so they're layered, so if you make changes to any layer, it goes up the stack. So that's one thing that I think we need to be aware of. I believe that's true. I mean, I've read a lot about Docker, I haven't played with it yet.
Yeah.
But- So the other thing that I noticed is that you're only running one command.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a web server and a database, do you run 2 separate containers and link them together, or?
You could install them all in the one container and run them all in the one container. But if you had some Trevor was talking about an example yesterday of running Bitcoin wallet on your machine, and he says that in Fedora you don't have the version of SSL that you need, but in CentOS you don't have a version of a different library that you need. So what he does is, and they're 2 different processes. So he runs on his host machine. He starts off the wallet kind of process, and then he dives into his Docker CentOS image to do one part of it. Like he runs a process in there, gets the output back, and then passes it to the next process, which is running in Docker Fedora image, and then gets it back. So they can talk to each other via the host and store data on the disk, which each one can read.
It's a process where you pipe it to.
Yeah.
But how it actually works, I haven't tried it. But you can use the disk of the host to share things between processes.
Just a follow-up on that, when you're talking about running multiple services out of a Docker or perhaps multiple applications that are more tightly linked than you might want. When you started up Apache before, you ran Apache directly and demonized it or ran it in the foreground, sorry.
Yep.
But what if you've got multiple things and you actually want to run the equivalent of init or some type of management
Yeah,
system?
so the Fusion guys who make Passenger, they've got Docker images that have init, cron, and SSH on the image.
Okay.
And so that's the problem that they address, is that if you just run it that way, then you don't have a full, don't think of it as a VM because you just have the process.
It's like
And then
on
more
steroids.
stuff will go wrong, right? Because as it runs along, you kind of assume that it's there.
Yeah.
So there are images around that have those, and then it kind of blurs the line between a container and having more of.
Yeah, someone's heading all over these days.
Sort of, yes.
So can you clarify that? How many processes can you actually run on the container? Or what types of
You
processes?
can run an infinite amount of processes, but I guess like if you're running something like cron in a Docker image, I don't know how that would work, because even running like Apache in the background, I have trouble connecting to it from outside. So how do you get your data back out when it's running as a daemon? I don't know. Maybe it has to write things to the disk.
So I think that initial process that you run would have to launch everything. That's how I believe you have to run multiple processes.
Right.
There's always a root process. It doesn't run startup scripts.
Maybe.
So you just got like a process tree that you can kick off. Pretty much.
Or a bash script that runs everything.
So like if you do want to run Apache and a database, like you were saying, MySQL and Apache
Yeah.
in the one image.
But they say cheap, you just have two, right?
But you have to make sure that it doesn't exit.
Right.
Because once that initial process exits,
Yeah.
it goes away.
Okay.
So it's a different mental model than virtual machines and NIST.
Well, init kind of is.
But init doesn't run.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's kind of a process that doesn't go away in that sense.
I think it's designed for a different.
Yeah.
So I think it's designed to have, this is your web service and this is your database
Segregating the
service.
services,
There's
yeah.
I believe they're starting to work on linking those things together. There's an orchestration part of this. Because when you deploy, you need something to manage ports that it's, there needs to be a proxy in front of it to send traffic to the right.
So Graham, when you said you use Docker for packaging, is that just packaging like a single app and that's the only app that you run?
An example might be, at the moment we build a Java application and we wrap it in an RPM, we install it on a VM, we do YUM upgrade and that kind of thing. But there's three parts to a system. There's code, configuration, and data. So RPM captures code, but then you need to apply some configuration, which could be Puppet or anything else, and then obviously you need to connect it to data, typically a database. So what we're trying to explore is if we can use Docker to capture a more complete set of what the code is. So rather than having an RPM which depends on 30 RPM, which depends on your system and everything, we just give all that power to the developers and they say, as long as, whatever you give us could even be the same operating system. It doesn't have to be. It's just a piece of code that is a stateless machine. You've tested or whatever works. And then, the configuration will pull in and then we'll hook it up to a data source, whatever.
Yeah. So it's a black box, basically.
Yeah.
It's got inputs and outputs.
Yeah.
And you don't really care what happens.
Yeah.
Well,
Another example is, some sysadmins might know this pain is like when you're dealing with hardware management devices like DRACs and ILOs and KVMs and stuff, they often have these weird requirements on certain versions of Java and certain versions of Firefox and everything. So I can just create a Docker that has all the weird and outdated and completely insecure versions of Java they need, and I can actually run Firefox in that to connect and do my work. So that way we can kind of use it for security rather than having to keep all that garbage.
Yeah, well, that was the idea of zones and Solaris, right? So like,
Yeah.
the idea is that you can run something very insecure inside a single process that has another wrapper around it. So that's, I think, a good example.
So what's the overhead of a process? Like process is it memory? So the container is just one bit of disk, and then you have multiple processes that share that container.
Yeah, well, it gets like, one of the nice ways I've been trying to, I haven't got there yet, but there's like the idea of using it as CI. So Jenkins then builds Docker, and then you can have essentially an infinite number of Docker images for whenever the QA team wants to log in and look at one. But they're essentially just sitting there idle, not doing anything.
Just
And
taking up
then as
disk.
someone hits them, then the process is running. So, but I haven't got that perfect yet. But that came out of the idea of essentially out of CI creating a whole virtual machine or an image, and that's quite heavy.
It is, yeah.
Right. So
Yeah, we were talking a bit about, or maybe I should finish my presentation before I go on to that, but so yeah, some caveats. I just got 2 more slides about Docker, that it's not production ready, like it's written all over their website, and they're not just saying that because they want to get out of supporting it or they're scared or something, but it's really not production ready. So because it's
version 1 was released last week or something, and it is.
Oh really?
I thought they did after version 1.
Okay.
Maybe.
I think
Well-
0.8's just been released.
If anyone was there yesterday, you'd be very scared because it's not safe. In Linux, there's a thing called system calls. You probably know about it. I didn't really know that much about it. I still don't know that much about it. But these are basically all the calls on the system. For example, so resetting your time. They're all available to Docker. So if someone is running Docker on your machine, they can reset your time. Basically, their root, they can do everything that they want to. So that's probably why you should be running it in a virtual machine that's a bit containerized, away from your host system. So you can mount the file system of the host, so you can add users, you can change passwords, you can corrupt data, you can do lots of things on the host system. So that's another reason why, actually, that kind of leads on to what I was going to say before, is that if you're going to run this kind of thing in production, all you could do is have one Docker image per host, because they can interfere with each other. They can write stuff to the disk and corrupt each other, basically. So don't share more than one Docker image on a production system. You can access processes of the container from the host. So so from the host machine, you can see the processes of the container. So if I'm running one, am I still running one? No, but if I run something like that, and then check my processes. You can see that I'm running a Docker container. LXC start, yeah. So that means it's not, I could kill it from my host machine. The reverse is not true. So if I'm inside here,
Well, maybe that's the same with any virtualization tech.
yeah.
You're on the host, you can kill containers that you're running.
Okay, well, it's as bad as any virtualization. So some things like how to deal with security issues. You can, so treat Docker as you would sudo. Don't use it lightly. Trust the images you run. They have root access. So if you download someone else's image, you better trust that they didn't do something nasty when you run it. And don't allow remote access to Docker, which is what most of the kind of hacky things Trevor showed yesterday were based on. You can kind of set up Docker to allow remote calls into Docker from outside your system, and that's entirely not safe.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that's kind of the end of my presentation. Thanks for listening. And
Do some practical hands-on stuff.
yeah.
So what are you using Docker for?
I hadn't really played with Docker that much until I prepared for this presentation, but I used it today for the first time in my job after using it for a few days. So I work in support, right? So sometimes it's necessary to actually use the image or the virtual machine or the version of the product that the customer's using So you can, today I needed rel 6.5 just to verify what we ship with it, to verify that someone, they didn't get that package from us. So I just, we have an internal repo at Red Hat, and I just pulled the Docker, the rel 6.5 image from there, and just checked what we packaged. So that was really neat because, and now next time I want to run 6.5, I could do that with virtual machines, but I don't want to have to create a virtual machine, which takes a long time. I don't want to have to boot it up. It's nice. And often what I do, I use Git most of the time because I work with JBoss, right? So it's not a whole VM, it's a little bit more lightweight. But normally what I do is if I work on a support case, I create a branch in Git and I do all the changes that I need for that support case to reproduce a problem or whatever. And that's always stored there. If I need to come back to that case later, I just check out that branch and I've got exactly the same code. Same thing with Docker. Like if I needed to use, certain version of like rel 6.5, install a few things to recreate a customer's issue with rel, then I could get back to that later and I could check out another one and not using up lots of disk space, and there's lots of advantages in that. The other thing that I thought of, which we haven't started using that, but we will, I think, is it's really easy to see differences between images. So if you just do a Docker export, you can see the whole file system. So you can and you tar it up, and then you can actually check the diffs between two different images.
That's the bit you didn't touch on, right, is the idea that, if I understand correctly, like basically I pull down my initial image, right, I do some thing and commit. If I ship that to you,
yep.
You only need delta, right? Like it's tiny, I'm not shipping the whole
I
image, right?
think, you're right. If I had the base image,
Yeah.
I just
Oh, that's why the packaging makes sense.
And that's why Docker's really interesting,
Because
right?
it's an
Because then shipping
Versus
it to not my computer is really cheap, because you're just shipping the delta between the base image, and that's why there's a base image if you want to think of it that way. And then that's why it uses AUFS, right? So you've got 42 levels of change, and then you commit, you use one, and then you just ship that difference. And so that's why it's lightweight, because then I can basically send it to you just like a Git commit.
Yeah.
So it's really small. Whereas if you've ever shipped around VMs, it's kind of a complete pain in the butt.
Yeah. And we could practice that because Docker have the remote repo. So if you have an account, you can push to their public repo. You can also host.
That's
a
when
repo.
I got it. Like when I pushed it to the Docker repo, and you're kind of like, oh, now I'm on another computer, pull it down. It's tiny.
Yep.
It's really like thinking about it like Git for VMs in general, because it's got tags, has a branching, but it's got remote repositories, all of the commands, commit, push, have all like the similar meaning for code as they do for Docker. So, it's a way of thinking of it.
Can you control memory allocation? That's the thing. If you want to run multiple containers on a host, sort of limit how much memory is allowed to use. Or
Yes, apparently you can. That came up yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. I don't know the details about that, but apparently you can. But it's Trevor demonstrated yesterday. You can't limit the amount of processes that it can run, which is a big security hole because you can do a fork bomb and crash the host. So I think you can limit maybe memory. Something, I don't know what, but disk. But you can't limit the disk because it has full access to the disk of the host. Yeah, maybe memory.
So most of the VMs or the containers that you deal with are sort of like the terminal-based, the server versions of that operating system. Is there Linux has ways to get that UI, the X windows out through the network. Can you run your whole desktop inside a container?
Good question.
You certainly can. If you go on GitHub and search for literally like Docker desktop or something, there's people that do that.
Right. So that's just like the Ubuntu desktop will start showing up there.
Yeah, you do it over SSH tunneling with it.
Okay.
You'll have X running locally, and you just SSH in and do an SSH 14 session, and then you'll.
Right. So it's all in there. All of Linux is sort of.
So the desktop itself is running. You can run a bunch of on Fedora and vice versa. Desktop stuff's a bit difficult though, because you're using the kernel of the host operating system. Obviously, and you don't have direct
Do you want to walk us
access to
through
like
maybe that
the video
demo?
card or
Do it on our
anything,
laptops?
it's
Oh yeah, yeah.
results
We can
may
do that.
vary from
Yeah.
some things, like positive or-
Right, so not as refined as a virtual box, yeah,
Yeah,
that
no.
sort of stuff is in there, but, right.
To the point where we can get the browser session up.
Yeah.
Locally.
So you guys using it to wrap like a single service in a container, but
Just
just
to-
want multiple of them on a host?
Just one per one VM for the reasons specified at the moment. So
Yeah.
not very glorious, just literally a new way of packaging. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
To avoid RPM dependency hell and to separate what the developers want to do, like what versions of Ruby they want to use, for example, versus or Python. So Python 3 versus the system. You know, Python we need to run everything else, so that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not the exciting part of Docker, but it gives us a little bit of benefit.
Yeah.
Where are people composing those sort of menu of choices, like, are you sort of dragging and dropping version numbers, or is that like in a spreadsheet or something where you say you get the choice of provisioning it like you want it, and then like there's always options to change all of those pieces? Has that been like visualized in some sort of UI that lets you mix up your systems?
Talking about management of the Docker, are you talking about like the software inside a Docker container, or?
We might take that question offline
Yeah.
and just
Okay.
get to the practical session, because there's nothing like
Cool.
making mistakes yourself to learn something.
Yeah.
So maybe if Jason could walk us through the demo, and we can install HTTP,
Yep.
install Apache on your laptop, on your Docker instance, and then,
Yep.
yeah.
So hopefully you got Docker installed.
Yes, so we're assuming everyone that wants to participate has got Docker installed. Got to the Hello World example on that getting started page.
So I'll just switch over to this part of, this is my blog, and you have to pull down the Fedora image, which I had trouble with when I tried it. So when I tried to just run this command, which you can do, sudo docker run fedora bin bash, just to drop it into the shell, it'll try and grab the Fedora image, but if it fails, it's not fault tolerant and it just crashes, and you have to keep trying until it works, which sucks. But this command worked a lot better for me, docker pull Fedora. So try that if you're going to pull the Fedora image. And there was some problem with Ubuntu. I couldn't get Apache to run in it. I can't remember why, but
Yeah, what's that? Let's try that before.
yeah, no, I
It
couldn't.
needs to put access to know it.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't figure that out yesterday. I had a quick go at it and went. "Ah." Anyway, I was using Fedora for my demo anyway, so I'll just use Fedora. It works on CentOS too. So has everyone got Fedora down yet?
Downloading. The Wi-Fi is getting slower.
By the way, my blog runs in OpenShift, so it's running in an LXC container.
LXC is the glorified cheroot. Would that be a good description?
I don't know much about it, to be honest, but yeah, it's kind of like a container, a Linux container, and I don't really know what a chroot is, so I can't comment on that. But yeah, I think that's how I think of it too.
But with the AUFS stuff as well.
So that's part
Oh,
of
it's
Docker.
different to LXC.
Yeah, so I think Docker brings those together.
LXC plus AUFS. Different model again, isn't it?
There's a LXC provisioner for Vagrant